Hey, baby. Baby, you're messing the setting. So, this is. Okay. Is there any page size? No, it's just. Okay. 139, I think. Yes. Okay. Okay, so I wanted to read a chapter today from a book from Alejandro Jodorowsky, titled Psychomagic. That someone gave me some time ago. So Psychomagic and the Transformative Power of Shamanic Psychotherapie. And so there's a chapter that recently, let me see, chapter 11. There is, okay. Named The Invisible Bridge. Okay, so this is an interview between the author and a friend. Okay, let me see. Actually, if we can move this. Okay. To what can we aspire in this life? To many things, but above all, a long life. For this, we need to work in a job that we like and always be peaceful people. To do what we like. We must be what we are and not what they want us to be. To love what we love without obligation, without neurotic knots that we cannot untie. To desire what we want and to create what we are capable of making. To live with a certain prosperity without wasting, but a prosperity for everyone, not a prosperity based on exploiting others. And, of course, it is necessary to become immortals, and for this, we have to live as if we were immortals, thinking that we have 1,000 years more to do what we want, but without forgetting that in 10 seconds we can die. In many schools, wisdom is obtained through pleasure, happiness, the prohibited. In others, through asceticism, penance, surrender, and sacrifice. Do they all go to the same place? All are roads to finding oneself. Now, all these paths must be taken with the greatest dignity because we are mortals. We are not eternal, and our present state is going to end. Life defeats us every moment. Even if we are titans, we are defeated. Knowing this, we can work more calmly with humility. It is about attaining holiness, resolving to get to that. Happiness does not have to do with having things, but being happy with life. One can lose the battle while yet in the womb, because we can become neurotic fetuses if the mother doesn't want us. In this case, recovering the happiness in life is something magnificent that allows our union with the universe in its totality, with time and with space, with consciousness in its totality. It is a state of constant euphoric trance in the body, possible because we are little treasure chests, containing an immensity that, at the same time, isn't the smallest of ourselves. We can arrive by many roads to the state of euphoria for living. Yes, but not by whatever manner. I began through art. I did avant-garde theater, poetry, scandal, all of it. Then I practiced meditation, hours meditating time, everything contrary to what I had done, but always moved by a constant attention, by a constant desire of curiosity and of knowing without fear. This is audacity. It is the secret of life. Beyond imagining, playing with the mind in order to not be prisoners of reality, the objective, is it to change ourselves and, more precisely, to cure ourselves? You talk about the mind, but ever since I discovered the tarot, I talk about a minimum of 4 centers of the human being: intellectual, emotional, sexual, and physical. It is not only the mind that plays this juggling act. The emotional center, the sexual center, and the physical also act. It is necessary to know oneself and to observe. For example, the intellectual center wants to be and becomes in silence. The emotional center wants to love and arrives at loving through indifference. The sexual center wants to create and arrives at creating by learning to fail. The physical center wants to live and lives by learning to die. If the life that surrounds us and the world that we live in are mental constructions, why can't we exit them by our will when we need to mark distance and to make a break in the road? Yes, we can leave it all. Yes, we can leave it all by will, but this demands bravery and strength on our part. Meditation is one of the possible ways. At what point does our freedom consist of knowing and assuming that our destiny is already written? I cannot say that the future is written. My rules tell me that when you ask me about a possible future, you are already showing your limitations, thinking there is only one possible future. If I open my mind to this theme and accept that there is a future, I must recognize that there are infinite possible futures that I can choose, because at each moment a different possibility opens before me. I construct my future through my choices. then we cannot see our destiny in linear or spatial way. No, I see it like a fan or a matrix of possible futures. That is to say, we can construct our destiny, but we cannot create our destiny. There are 10,000 paths, and all of them are in view. I can go with one of the 10,000 paths, but I cannot invent a 10,000 first. Then what is freedom based on? Inner freedom consists in being able to choose freely one of the 10,000 paths, using what we have called free will. And if you have a destiny because you project a genealogy tree into the future, then the future tends to repeat the past. And it is from this that we have to free ourselves. We have to have futures distinct from the past and seek to become ourselves. Your ideas could be described as mutationists, mutacionistas. Are we mutants? We all are. There are many things that we do not understand because our bodies are still developing. Recently I spoke with a doctor who told me that the pineal gland was an atrophied gland. I replied to him that the human being is an animal in evolution and cannot have anything in him atrophied. The pineal gland could be, why not, the seed of an organ that is developing and evolving into a fourth brain. He changed the scientific view a few hours before he was to present a paper at a scientific conference in Los Angeles. I explained to him that nothing is atrophied. In fact, you could say exactly the opposite, and that appears more logical to me. We are developing something new from this gland. There are things we do not understand because we are like chimpanzees. What sense does it make that we cannot now understand something we are destined to discover? We cannot imagine the eternal. We cannot conceive of it. And if we cannot understand the universe, we are ignorant and limited. You asked me about the sense of all this, but surely it is our descendants who will be able to understand it. We are here to produce descendants who can understand it. We are here to produce descendants who will use the same brain that we already have, but be more evolved. If the reptilian brain evolved into our 3 human brains, I sincerely believe that we are creating a 4th brain, and it doesn't have to be material. In the Middle Ages, they intuited this. They painted the 4th brain in the form of a halo, because that's how they saw it, as a golden circle around the head. What reason is there for painting a halo? Why would they invent a halo? Well, because the halo is real. What advice could you give to a seeker of knowledge, to someone who is looking for himself? I began with meditating, but before that I looked for people who had more elevated consciousness than mine, though I did not go to pay homage nor become a disciple. I put myself in contact with those whom I thought were interesting. The error that I committed was to make friends with teacher, because then you do not accept the exchange or the lesson. With friendship you unbalance the levels of consciousness between people. But by knowing these people, my level of consciousness, okay, wait, just jumped. My level of consciousness rose, and I learned a lot until I arrived at what I considered valid. When you get to a level that you value as important, you can and should devote yourself to others in order that they learn with you. From all your experiences with knowledge, psychoanalysis, shamanism, taking substances, meditation, what would stay with you? The most resounding exercise to which I have dedicated myself for years is to suspend thought, to succeed at not letting even one word enter my brain. Once I achieved that, even the thought that I was able to stop all thoughts left my head. This has been the most difficult. Also, to practice meditation was for me very important, although my path has been more to do with artistic creation. Do you advise against the rational path like philosophy or the study of science? I do not advise against. I believe that all these paths are also good. Philosophy made me pose questions for myself that later I had to resolve by way of other disciplines. Are the higher levels of consciousness found in people or in groups? It is difficult to belong to a group because established groups create dependencies. If we speak with the common sense that characterizes us, we must speak of the large group of humanity, all of humankind. Fortunately, it's been a while since I quit being picky about my clientele. Every Wednesday I meet those who want to come to a cafe, and I can read the tarot. At a certain age, you have to make yourself useful for others. When you have lived in life, has given you an experience, whether good or bad, the moment arrives when you should pass on what you know. Rather than turn into a dumb old person, you should go further every time. Aging does not exist, neither does mental decline. The memory can have less capacity to find a word, or maybe you can feel less sexual desire, less virulence, but there is no reason for desire to have disappeared. If during your life you have worked the emotions, when you mature, you begin to know sublime feelings which you did not have when you were young because nature did not let you. It takes 40 years to find yourself. The true opening of the consciousness cannot be had before this age. From there, the journey begins. You indicate that contemplation is the technique that perfects all these things. What is contemplation to you? In meditation, you immobilize yourself and dedicate your attention to what happens inside you, as if you were seated at the edge of the river seeing things pass by. And contemplation is the same, but you're swimming in the river. That is to say, you are seeing what happens to you, but you are in the depth of life, acting. What does to be possessed by the spirit of the teacher mean? Our brain is broad and infinite. In the same way that it produces the personality we have, it can produce others. That is to say, we learn to build our personality. Schizophrenics can have 30 personalities and even more. When you are going to see a teacher, you see another human being that has a higher level of consciousness than yours. What happens? To pursue this level of consciousness, your brain perceives it. So your brain grasps this level and reproduces it in your person, but because it's the first time you see it in yourself, you identify it with the teacher, with her ego, with her character. And the brain, instead of acting as if it had your form, gives you the form of the other. It makes you feel like you have the body of another, the personality of another, the apparent individuality of another. This produces an imitation, and I believe this is what you refer to when you say to be possessed by the spirit of the teacher. It is not that the teacher is inside you, but that there is an imitation of a level of consciousness that you are considering superior to yours. I just did a mess here with and the teacher who believes herself to be the chosen one? Well, on the path of the evolution of consciousness, there are traps. I explained this in my book, Los Evangelios para Sanar, Gospels for Healing. In reality, you are a path. Your brain is a path on which all gods walk. If on a path I see a god, and I believe myself a god, I have fallen into the trap of the guru. In reality, we are the path where things are passing. We are not the passersby. What are initiation tests? In Castaneda's words, challenges. Here's a way to think about them. We observe some traumas. A woman is raped and this destroys her life. Another woman is raped, she bathes, she cleans herself, she cries, she recovers, she decides that she is never going to talk about that again, and she continues with her life. The same thing happens in war. Some people stay hurt forever, yet others become stronger. The point is that traumas do not produce illness. Traumas are the detonators. There is a latent illness inside us that the trauma makes explode. And as far as initiation tests, they consist of the following. You have a level of consciousness, and you are faced with an event. You have to react in a useful way and advance. The test is a challenge for you to evolve. And a sacrifice. Is it a masochistic trap? That's right. Religions have confused us. In our culture, the sky is not on earth, it is not within your reach. You have to attain the beyond by suffering in life, and the church tells you that suffering will make you rich and powerful. Why are we afraid when we get close to archetypes by way of dreams, the imagination, or hallucinogenic substances? The masses, people in general, only change their level of consciousness when they are in serious trouble, like, for example, following a natural disaster or terrorism. The masses are afraid of archetypes because archetypes are contained in higher levels of consciousness, and this produces fear in people who do not want to change. Each time we confront archetypes, we are confronting the dissolution of identity. Have we built an invisible skin that we call ego? No, the skin is not the ego. We are habituated to think that it is like that, but it's not true. Let's look deeper. Imagine the lion out roaming his territory. When he senses that some prey has entered his territory, he pounces. Also, there are plants whose perception reaches thousands of kilometers, birds that manage formidable distance in flight, or organisms that follow themselves to be felt very far away. And man, well, through telepathy, the human being can go around the world. Man has no limits. So, what would be the ego? Many times one speaks of the ego without understanding it. In reality, we have our essential being and another acquired part that permits an identification or an identity. This last one is the ego, an acquired identity which is at the service of the essence. The ego can degenerate into The ego can degenerate into derived personalities, schizophrenics or paranoids, because it is the ego that notices the traumas and blows of life. You admit that for years you have a gigantic ego. What can a person do in our world without an ego? The ego is deaf and blind. The ego has been tamed. This is the core in the Hindu doctrine. The ego must bend to the essence. In social activity, the biggest egos develop, like in the university, where a person talks and talks even though no one is paying attention and no one ever listens. With this type of person, there is no dialogue, only a long monologue. Life requires us to enter into dialogue and to listen to others. The ego is necessary, like the shell of an egg. It develops the essence. All this about kill the ego is this craziness of gurus who, of course, are huge egomaniacs. I remember Osho, Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, who, in spite of being an extremely intelligent person, made his followers put his face on their t-shirts. In each of his books, there were 15 or 20 photos of his body. The ego can convert itself into something delirious. This man spent his life fighting against the ego and, in so doing, did nothing but strengthen his own. He confronted the egos of others but never his own. I look at the gurus like clowns. They are necessary, but they are big paper dolls. Are we slaves of our desires? We are always desiring things, more money, more objects. The world is pure desire. We get it in our heads that we have to resist aging. Thousands of commercials encourage us to thicken our lips, lift our tits, stretch our dicks, firm our butts. We desire and we desire whatever we see in the advertisements or on the street. Every time I connect to the internet, I'm sure to get 4 propositions: lengthen my phallus, lose weight, buy prostitutes, and win a fortune without working. Our imaginary banks appear where you win millions. This is a serious problem with our society. It is full of desires to consume and to show off, but there is very little desire to be. We should learn then, as you have told us so many times, to defeat desire. The Oriental schools pass on a very old wisdom that should be revised. They have greatly idealized the teachings of Buddha, and one must be careful. The legend of Buddha, if one looks at it well, is quite grim. A young rich kid abandons his wife and child to be carefree. He was someone who feared the most natural things in the world, like death, old age, illness, poverty. But of course, the doctrine assumes that the liberation of desires grants salvation. That salvation cannot come through rebirth, because it believes only in the rebirth or the pilgrimage of the soul. Now that's a lot to suppose, and it could be untrue. If I do not believe in reincarnation, Buddha fails me. For him it is necessary to escape from this life in order to not be reincarnated again. And this is an error. It is not necessary to escape from anything. It is necessary to live life. I do not know if reincarnation exists. We cannot know that. We cannot establish doctrines in which I must believe, communicating things by saying, let's stop the wheel on incarnation, karma, and so forth. They are suspicious beliefs. In no way do I use them. Well studied, they are toxins for everyone. I would like to ask you about death. What is death? Only a change, a mutation. We do not have death, but rather the change it assumes. Where did you learn this? laughter. Death is a word, and I began to learn it with the tarot. Death is Arcana 13, and it does not have a name. It is situated in the middle of the deck. I had realized that once I was 15 years old, I disappeared. Then I was 13 years old, then 40 years old. And I continue disappearing. Right now I am 74, and I am another person, yet I continue, content. When I am 90, I will be happy. When I am 100 years old, I will continue to be content. When I am 300, I will be stupendous. When I am 1,000,000 years old, I will be party. I will be a party. Do you believe something of us stays when we die? They asked a Zen master, what is after death? And he said, I do not know. I still have not yet died. I am here, but I know that what I am continuous. But I know that what I am continues. The chariot tarot is sunken into the earth. Where is it going? The earth moves it and displaces it. We advance with the universe. What do I care about after? It was never important to me how I would be at 80 years old, or 100, or 1,000,000, or 60 million. What is important is to know who I am now, not where I am going. When you begin little by little to lose your identity, to become a generic human, to stop seeing yourself being any certain age, then you stop identifying with time in general. Later you are no longer a clear native of a motherland, nor a speaker of a certain language. You do not see yourself in your name. You do not confuse yourself with the things you own. You begin to stop the identification. But where do we stand in this vision of ourselves? You hold on tight to who you are, the happiness of life. You are happier every day, and you do not need the rigid costume of the character or the personality. You are fluid like water. Lao Tzu says one must be like water and take the shape of the vase that holds it. Go through life taking shapes, and this is magnificent. There is a moment when you accept it and you tell yourself, what I am is disappearing, and once you are conscious, you are there all the time. You feel in your heels an abyss of total emptiness, and you go and advancing like a light, and this light that you are knows it is going to swallow the abyss. This hope exists that you dissolve with an infinite joy into the cosmic ocean, and you are you, but you always accept that you are giving way to your consciousness. The ultimate gift you give is your consciousness. When you arrive at death, the best you can offer is a perfect and enlightened consciousness, a clear consciousness, and that you must create, because if not, as Goldie said, you die like a dog without offering consciousness and without building a soul. It is said that power is locked between the walls of the skull, but where would you place consciousness? Outside of the body. The body is like the stone of a peach. However, the consciousness does not have limits, and it is in constant expansion. You suggest that by an effort of the imagination we can free ourselves from the obvious. In the same way, listening to music and playing with the memory could transfer us to another place. However, it is not enough to play with a handful of images. We must change to improve, change the subjects which we imagine. Isn't that right? There is a kind of imagination that is almost industrial. This is delusion. One must not confuse the imagination with constant delusions. I can imagine myself as whatever I can, as whatever I want, to all the time without going into any depth at all. stories and stories and stories without any deeper meaning. Or we can, like Kafka, submerge ourselves to a certain level, then stand still. He never achieved happiness. He rooted himself in neurosis. Strength is always necessary, but why is this constant effort to existence demanded of us? In life it is necessary to always be alert but not tense. I observed that when you say strength, you feel it like something unpleasant, but I do not believe it necessary to make things detestable when we could make them likable. When I speak of strength, I speak of agreeable strength. To paint, to dance, to live, these are totally pleasant strengths. We should do what pleases us in life and try very hard at it. Life is a test. A trial? No. Life is an initiation school. Or as Castaneda said, a challenge for the warrior. This is important. Is it at all useful to theorize about life? He who theorizes about life does so because he knows nothing about life, but he who knows life should communicate his experiences, teach what he has lived. We return once more to the old and obstinate question, why does what exists exist? A woman who was very sick from cancer called me from the hospital and asked me, what is the purpose of life? I thought, and I responded with what she hoped. Life doesn't make sense. She sighed and said, this is what I hope to hear. The next day she died. I answered like that to console her because this woman could not be cured. Although I believe life does make sense, we do not have to know what that sense is. It is a mystery. The idea that all things have a purpose is very idealistic. Of course, we have an end, but we do not know what it is. If this were not so, I would not be here. If we have a purpose as humanity in the universe, we have a destiny, however, we do not have to know it rationally. What it is necessary to accept this in the healthiest way possible. To convert our planet into a garden, enrich it, and enrich ourselves. What does it mean to be yourself? Can we ever know who we are? Knowing yourself really means that you are the universe. I do not have limits because I am united with the universe like an organism. This is my life. What happens is my life and is life. If I know myself, I am the actor and the spectator, the known and the knower at the same time. Up to a certain point I can go from actor to spectator, but there is a supreme moment in which the actor and the spectator melt together. This is not just knowledge, it is pure consciousness, a state of knowing. What does it mean to be realized through the transpersonal? Hasn't this word been overused? It is not hot air, it is simply a useful construct. What we understand to be personal corresponds with the attitude of enclosing yourself in your own psychology and analyzing everything from your own perspective. The transpersonal means to accept that the other exists and to keep that in mind when perceiving the world and figuring things out. In this sense, the transpersonal transcends the boundaries. We would have to, on this path, get to the androgynous thought. If you were a common person, you would be thinking first as a Spaniard, then as a man, then as an earthling. The ideal is to think without nationality, without sexual definition, and without being deformed by the solar system. Can we believe that one day we can fulfill ourselves? This is a trap because no one fulfills himself fully. What is fulfilling oneself? Advancing as one can, for example, totally. Today, all day I have written for Los Tecnopadres, a series presented as a comic strip, which I love. I am happy because I like the scene I invented. I am euphoric because I am creating, although it will be a story for children or for young people. It fascinates me. And each morning I write a poem of 4 or 5 lines. I do not have time for more. These are little things that I do and that I like. Okay, here is a poem. Abandoned room, ownerless home, emptiness lies in wait under my words, like a blind man who would find a treasure in the garbage. I let winter pass. Do not thank me. What I have given you was given to me, for only you. I do not want you to love me. I want you to love. Flames are ownerless. Hearing that, I have the impression that our happiness comes from looking at the world in a certain way. It is not a question of perception, it's about being yourself. When you advance, you perceive yourself in your totality. It does not have to do with defining reality. If we say, I would like to know, we are projecting the illness, we are projecting the illusion of having an I, and further, that we can know it. I don't have anything to do with that. Since classic antiquity, we've honored the expression, know thyself, but it is really confusing. People think that it is similar to going looking for something, but when we say, know thyself, this thyself is really the universe. The universe knows itself. Know me, says the universe. In the voice of God, know yourself means know me. But be careful with this. Do not think you are me and I am you. In truth, you are not me, but I am you. The greatest teachers say we have to learn to die in peace, but to do that, is all of this journey necessary? Yes, of course. The purpose of life is to learn to die in peace. Play dying, say the Chinese. But to die is to enter into a process like when childhood slowly passes into puberty, the hair, the hormones. You live as a change. You live as a change. You have forward in life. You move forward in life, and old age begins, which is another period. The hair begins to turn white, the teeth yellow. If you fight against old age, you age with anxiety. If you fight against puberty, you traumatize yourself. At a given moment, we all enter into a process of death, which we can and should live exactly as all the earlier changes. Death is nothing more than a state. No one is dead, no one dies. We all enter into a process of death, and it is marvelous to accept it with the same tranquility as when we enter into puberty or into maturity.